We're seeing the faces of the three children who were murdered during a knife attack at a Taylor Swift-themed dance event in England. Now, Taylor herself is sharing her heartbreak over the news, saying it has left her completely in shock.
The UK just had the most terrifying summer of all time, but it might only get worse in the coming days. In fact, the terror may eventually lead to something bigger. For a while now, religious and racial tension has risen in the United Kingdom. First, it was between the Protestants and the Catholics. Then, in most recent times, these two sworn enemies finally found something that would make them agree, and this had to do with the teeming population of Muslim immigrants. Right now, let's take a look at the origin of this mess and how things have gotten scarier in the last few days. Because the UK is on the brink of civil wars as Muslims versus Christian situation is getting worse. Let's have a look at how the UK is on the brink of civil war. Muslims vs Christians. Situation is getting insane. The tension. The summer of 2024 started on a good note in the United Kingdom, and as usual, everyone was super pumped about the fun that usually comes with summer. Beach hangouts, outdoor games, and dance parties were all parts of the fun. However, for some kids in Southport, the dance party ended in a disaster which later sparked violence all around the United Kingdom. It all started on the 29th of July, 2024, when some news was flying around about a brutal stabbing which happened at a Taylor Swift dance workshop for kids in Southport. There, the intruder, whose identity was unknown at the time of the incident, walked into the party with a knife and launched an attack on the kids. At the end of the disastrous event, 3 kids had lost their lives. 8 made it to the hospital and 5 others were brutally injured. Unexpectedly, the sad event sparked tension all around Southport when it was rumored that the perpetrator of the attack was a Muslim immigrant and an asylum seeker. A certain far-right group created a Telegram group for hundreds and hundreds of Southport natives, and the people were fed lies about the stabbing incident. According to the fake news, which they all thought was the truth, the people were told that the criminal was a young Muslim immigrant named Ali al-Shakati. This news seemed like it watered the seed of hatred that the people have had towards the immigrants, especially those of this religion. So because of the notion they've nurtured about the Muslim immigrants, they probably felt no need to verify the news. And before the truth could make it out of hiding, a lot of damage had been done. The suspicions about the things that may follow the incident started rising when Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, went for the flower-laying ceremony in Southport the next day, and he was welcomed by a very cold and hostile shout. At first, one would think that the people acted that way because they were probably grieving the lost kids. However, everything became clear when the flower-laying ceremony was followed by hostile shouts from a large group of people. In fact, one of them was bold enough to scream, and the Prime Minister, he said, "How many more, Starmer? When are you going to do something?" At that moment, anyone could see the cloud of violence gathering. In no time, the cloud was heavily pregnant, and the rain of violence was about to hit the United Kingdom. The anti-immigration protesters were out on the streets of Southport, where they staged a protest using several slogans and catchphrases. Just a few streets away from where the brutal incident happened, the protesters started a demonstration outside the Southport Mosque, and it might have looked like a harmless demonstration at first. However, before noon, the protests led into a major riot, which is now regarded as the biggest state of unrest in the United Kingdom since the last decade. The violent protesters attacked police officers and threw eggs, stones, and planks of wood at the mosque. The police tried several means to restrain the protesters, pepper spray, and even taser, but all their efforts were fruitless, and it looked like the devil was unleashed over Southport. The protesters continued their violent acts. They attacked the mosque, burnt the police van, and ended up injuring over 50 people before nightfall, including policemen. As the day got dark, the protesters were off the streets, and it seemed like the peace of the city had been restored. However, this was only the beginning of the horrific summer, because the violence which started in Southport was about to spread to other parts of the United Kingdom. The following day, immigrants in other towns and cities like England, Belfast, and Northern Ireland started feeling the heat of the protest. Hundreds of young British men and women in these places were also on the street, holding anti-immigrant placards and committing every form of atrocity you can think of. It looked like the wave of the false news which started on the Telegram group had spread to the neighboring towns and cities, and the people would never feel safe with Muslim immigrants anymore. Also in Sunderland, the protesters staged a demonstration which ended in a riot as expected. But this time, the riot led to the Citizens Advice Bureau being set on fire and a number of police officers badly injured. Before the government could help the situation, the riot had spread to some parts of London, Manchester, Hartlepool, and Aldershot, and on the 31st of July, 2 days after the stabbing incident, hundreds of protesters were arrested in these cities. Well, the police must have thought that arrests would bring things back to normal, but unfortunately, it did not really change so much. It probably made matters even worse. The protesters felt that the government and the security agents were not handling the situation the way they should, and they were hell-bent on seeing the immigrants sent out of the United Kingdom, especially the Muslim ones. So no matter how hard the policemen tried, the riot only got more severe and things got really terrific over the weekend. At this time, some other citizens and residents of the major cities and towns had started counter-protests to stop the anti-immigration protesters. So you see why things got really intense over the weekend? The anti-immigration protesters had too many people standing in their way, and they had too much anger boiling in their blood as well. So the unrest rose to a whole new level when these anti-immigration protesters clashed with the police and the counter-protesters. They went as far as attacking homes and businesses owned by immigrants. They also attacked hotels which had been converted into homes for asylum seekers, and it looked like they could not be stopped. However, the police and the counter-protesters would not rest until normalcy was restored, and good for them, they were able to achieve this in the end. Around a week after the incident, which led to the protests and riots, the sanity was restored, all thanks to the police and the counter-protesters that later outnumbered the anti-immigration protesters. In the peaceful days following the long week of turbulence, over 1,000 people were arrested in connection with the anti-immigration protests and riots. Also, about 800 were charged, and many of them were sentenced and imprisoned for 2, 3, and up to 9 years. Now, the arrests and sentences made sense, and it would probably serve as a means of curbing further occurrences like this one, but it was not the most important thing that happened. Guess what? They later found out that the crime was not committed by a Muslim. In fact, he was not even an immigrant. As against the rumor which was used to spark violence and unrest, the perpetrator of the heinous act was actually a British guy. How crazy is that? The fact that some people knew how to incite the public with the news of a Muslim immigrant only shows the level of tension which exists between the British and the Muslim immigrants. So, you know what that means? This big little incident may only be a warning for the civil war that may break out if the tension is not properly addressed and removed. The rise of Islamophobia. As earlier insinuated, the far-right activists only hijacked the incident to cause violence in the United Kingdom, knowing the kind of enmity that already existed towards the Muslim immigrants. Speaking of that, it did not just start today. Islamophobia has been a thing in the United Kingdom since the 1980s. The term Islamophobia is used in the United Kingdom to refer to the behaviors which the citizens show as an expression of anxiety, fear, hostility, and rejection towards Islam. However, these behaviors are expressed towards Muslims, particularly those who are immigrants in the United Kingdom. These behaviors are expressed in many ways, and public violence is only a part of it. In day-to-day operations, Islamophobia is expressed in other ways, which includes discrimination in the workforce, education, and negative coverage in the media. The media has played a major part in painting the Muslim immigrants as a menace in the United Kingdom, and this explains why the people will not think twice if they are told that a Muslim guy was involved in a serious crime.
In our communities, and they want to spread hate crime.
I mean, the media has placed them at the center of crime, and it began to look like that is the only thing they do around the UK. This bad impression that the media gives about the Muslim immigrants has caused major discrimination in every sector as well. No one wants to give the newly migrated Muslim family an apartment, and no one wants the Muslim guy in their company. According to research, a young Muslim guy in the United Kingdom
is that my community now is communicating with parts of society
has a 70% lesser chance of getting the same kind of job as a British guy of the same age and qualifications. So come to think of it, with a lesser chance of getting a job or an accommodation, it should probably be justifiable that a larger number of these people are asylum seekers. And it also makes sense that the government gives a lot of attention to the asylum seekers, and they always seek to provide shelter for them. But as if the hostility is not enough, the citizens still flare up when the government opens new asylums to accommodate the Muslim immigrants. Well, before you judge them, they also have some reasons for their actions. Most British young men believe that the presence of these young Muslim immigrants puts a strain on job availability, and it reduces their chances of getting decent jobs when they should. In their words, they never want to share their jobs with immigrants. So for them, the only way peace could reign would be these Muslim immigrants returning to their countries. However, the government doesn't seem to think the same way. The UK government considers the Muslim immigrants as a major part of the economy. In fact, the government thinks that these immigrants are the boosters of the economy and they are very important to the country. So this explains why the government would always stand behind the immigrants and continue to provide asylum for those that need it. Speaking of asylums, in some parts of the United Kingdom, the citizens have resorted to blaming the Muslim immigrants for the low rate of accommodation, which has become a big issue in some parts of the United Kingdom. As the government builds more asylums and even converts hotels to homes for asylum seekers in some places, a lot of British guys cannot seem to cope with these acts. First, they think that it's the reason accommodation is not really available for them as it should. Also, most of them cannot handle the fact that the government keeps creating space for the Muslim immigrants. So, around 2009, a voice rose from among the people, and this voice spoke more hate into the heart of the people. The voice is none other than the All-Party Parliamentary Group on British Muslims. This body raised a suggestion in May 2019 that the Muslim immigrants should be stopped from moving into the UK. However, the movement was rejected by both the police and government because they strongly believed in the positive impacts of the immigrants on the economy of the United Kingdom. Also, they believed that such movements would have a major consequence on the freedom of immigrants in the UK.
Residents and staff in absolute fear.
For a few years after the rejection of this movement, the public hate towards Muslim immigrants seemed like it subsided. But one thing was sure: the hate towards Muslim immigrants is like cancer that had eaten deep into the society. The government could try to deny it, the people may try to bottle it up, but it only needed another incident to rise up again. And about 5 years after the rejection, the stabbing incident was what it needed. Well, with the input of one man anyway. Yeah, I'm talking about Tommy Robinson, the most prominent far-right activist known in the United Kingdom. Tommy was that one man who wouldn't let the sleeping dog lie. Tommy Robinson, far-right activism.
Let's send a message to the world, to Keir Starmer especially, that the fight is not gone, okay? Not in us anyway.
As earlier mentioned, the violence and riot which followed the stabbing was initiated by a group of people who spread false news through a Telegram group. After digging deep into the root of the matter, it was discovered that the man Tommy Robinson could be the brain behind the whole thing. He probably cooked up a lie about the incident, and he made use of the Telegram group to spread it to the public. According to other news sources, he might have made use of his X account to spread the fake news further. Though the post made on X is said to be deleted already, the impact of the riot caused by the rumor is not one that would be forgotten in a long time. Well, Tommy Robinson probably had no reasons to cause violence and riot towards Muslim immigrants, except that it's his hobby to do so. This is what I mean. Robinson has been active in far-right politics for many years. He was a member of the British National Party between 2004 and 2005. For a short time in 2012, he was joint vice chairman of the British Freedom Party, and he co-founded the English Defence League in 2009. He led the majorly Islamophobic League until October 2013 and ended up spending a large part of his years in and out of the prison for sparking hate and inviting violence towards Muslim immigrants. For context, Robinson served 4 prison terms between 2005 and 2019. And 2 years later, he was sentenced again after he was said to have libeled a 15-year-old refugee at a school in Huddersfield. He was ordered to pay £100,000 in other legal costs. But as if that was not enough, in the same year, he was given a 5-year stalking prevention order for harassing journalist Lizzie Dearden and her partner. Now, I guess all that should give a clue of the kind of things that Tommy's capable of, right? Yep, that explains why he went straight into another crime just a few days after he got out of prison in 2024. According to news sources, the stabbing happened about 2 days after he got out of prison, or just finished serving time for a public crime he recently committed. However, he probably missed inciting the public and causing chaos, so he chose to pull another stunt, which disturbed the peace of the United Kingdom for weeks, and even made it into history as the largest chaos of the century. But come to think of it, while it's okay that there is someone to carry the blame of what happened, can we really dump it all on one person? I mean, it's safe to say that as long as there is someone like Tommy Robinson to spark trouble in the public, the people will always respond with hate and violence. So this is definitely not about one man, but the anger and hatred that boils on the blood of the people. And this brings us to the possibility of a civil war, which may eventually be the end of the riots and violence that have been ravaging the United Kingdom, especially towards Muslim immigrants. Civil war? The thing is, if you ask a lot of people who have witnessed the tension of the violence towards the Muslim immigrants in the UK, if they think that a civil war may eventually come up in the nearest future, they would most likely say yes. In fact, if care is not taken, it could be closer than you think. Come to think of it, just at the thought of a Muslim immigrant committing a crime in a city, the whole United Kingdom responded with violence, not only towards the immigrants, but the police and government-owned properties as well. In 2024, the United Kingdom has witnessed what they would call the most horrific week of the decade. So if the heart of the people is not purged of this hate towards the Muslim immigrants, what do you think would happen in the coming years? Or even months? Of course, we may keep believing that the tension is all about the high rate of immigration into the United Kingdom. However, when you think about it deeply, you would realize that the hate may be fueled majorly by religion. Since the United Kingdom is dominated by Protestant Christians and Catholics, the major difference in beliefs and culture could be a major cause for tension between these two groups. And since the government may never heed the call to stop Muslim immigrants from moving into the UK, the tension would only rise to an unspeakable height in no time. Now let's look into what's possible in the future. If the Muslim population keeps rising and the level of intolerance from the British Catholics and Christians skyrocket as well, the biggest civil war of the century may eventually break out. And if that happens, it may not be as little as we can imagine. We're talking about a civil war that may call the attention of other nations of the world. I mean, the United Kingdom has been home to people of several races, colors, religion, and colors. So if a civil war breaks out, it will not only affect the target audience, the Muslim immigrants. It is very possible that other races and religions will feel the heat as well. If this happens, other nations may step in, and before we know, we may have a very big fight before us. Even if the war doesn't affect other religions and races, there are chances that the other Muslim or Muslim-supporting nations will step into the fight against the Muslim immigrants. At the end of the day, it may become a religious fight between nations, and the end may be brutal. No matter what the end of the situation is, none looks good, and the best thing that can be done is to avoid the consequences that may be waiting at the end of a war. And to avoid this, the British government may have to put in more work to tackle the problem from the root. Whether the problem is religious, political, or whatever, the problem has to be pulled out from the root. And what this means is that instead of pointing fingers at one person or a group of people for causing violence, the hate in the comments' hearts of the people should first be dealt with. No doubt his may be one of the hardest things to do since the problem has existed for decades. However, the media can really do a good job in causing a start, or starting it at least. Since the enmity is fueled by all the negative things the media has to say about Muslim immigrants, things may really change for the better if the media change the narrative and say more good things than the bad. The truth is, if the United Kingdom and other nations that may be involved will not be consumed by a religious civil war that may arise from this Christian versus Muslim situation, more care has to be taken and measures have to be put in place, starting from every single person and sector. Okay, guys, we have come to the end of this thought-provoking video, and it's your turn to tell us what you think about this topic. Do you think that the hatred towards the Muslim immigrants may actually lead to a civil war? Or would you say that the British population may actually be right about the Muslim immigrants? Let us know all your thoughts about this crazy situation. And if you have any questions about this video, you can ask us in the comments section as well.